Hello to you. Good morning. How are you feeling?
Really good. I mean, lots of results to come in, but it looks like it's going to be an historic night for the Liberal Democrats. We're making big gains from the Conservatives in their heartlands, in places like Wimbledon and West Oxfordshire, and in places in the north like Stockport. We took that seat off Labour, as you mentioned, in Hull. And a huge vote of confidence, actually, in Liberal Democrat-run councils like Richmond, where there's complete takeover. There's only one Tory councillor left. And so, this is very positive news. I said yesterday that voters could use their ballots to send a message to Boris Johnson that he failed to provide the leadership on the cost of living emergency, which was the issue that voters were raising. And I think they've sent that message, and lots of Liberal Democrat councillors have been elected.
Professor Sir John Curtis, who's the expert in these matters, as you know, he says for the Liberal Democrats, so far last night, a notable advance, albeit from a relatively low past baseline. Is that fair?
Well, actually, 4 years ago, when many of these seats were last fought, we did really well. 4 years ago, we took control of Richmond Council, of Kingston Council, of South Cambridgeshire and elsewhere. So actually, we've been making a lot of progress over a number of years now. And I think that's very promising for the next general election. Liberal Democrats will be fighting particularly Conservatives in many seats in the next general election. And what was really interesting about last night's results, in places like Wimbledon and Cheadle and elsewhere, we were winning seats where we need to win seats in the next general election. So it was a great night for those councillors and for the voters who were putting their trust in those Liberal Democrat community activists, the Liberal Democrat champions. We're very well known for being really good community politicians. But also, I think it sent a signal for that base for us to grow and defeat Conservative MPs at the next general election.
Right. I mean, again, I'm looking at what Sir John Curtis has suggested in terms of his analysis of your performance so far. The Lib Dem's performance is about as good as the one which it achieved in the 2019 local elections when it profited from Theresa May's difficulties over Brexit.
Yeah, John Curtis has said tonight, I heard him, that it was a very good night for the Liberal Democrats. So I'm happy to agree with John Curtis' verdict that we are the party making the biggest gains so far. And so, there is a sense now, I find, in the party, whether it's our by-election victories last year, where we beat the Conservatives in True Blue Buckinghamshire and Cheshire and Amersham, took a seat that no one thought we could win, and then winning in North Shropshire, a seat the Conservatives held for 200 years. There's now a real picture emerging across the country that in many areas, particularly areas held by Conservative MPs, it's the Liberal Democrats who are the real challengers.
And you talked about local issues and how you feel Lib Dems run local councils, but how much did national issues and the behaviour of politicians at Westminster play into this, do you think?
Victoria, it was a mixture of both local and national. It always is, let's be honest. I think the national issue, which was the biggest actually, was the cost of living emergency. Partygate and all that awful scandals from the Tory backbenchers, that was on some voters' minds. But I had far more conversations about people's worries about the cost of living. I think millions of pensioners and families are really worried, and they felt that Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak and the whole Conservative government was ignoring them and taking them for granted. And actually, after the cost of living emergency, the other issue I heard most was the NHS crisis. People were really worried about the health and care for their families. So I think these are really big issues: the economy, our health service, and the Conservatives are not delivering.
Well, the Chancellor, if he were here, would say that he's come up with £9 billion worth of measures to help people who are struggling with the cost of living. And as far as the NHS is concerned, he would say that's the justification for raising national insurance, which is a tax that you want to scrap. And that rise will pay for the NHS.
Well, the Chancellor's failed to tax the windfall profits of the oil and gas companies. We've seen results from BP and Shell in the last two days which have confirmed what Liberal Democrats were the first party to say, was these oil and gas companies are making huge amounts of money on the flip side of the high heating bills and the high petrol prices that people are all paying. And it would be right to have a windfall tax, and we could use that money to have a big tax cut. We think a VAT cut to deliver £600 for the average family is one of the things we would like to do. We'd also like packages to help the most vulnerable. And the Chancellor isn't doing that. Liberal Democrats want a fair society where companies who are making these huge, unexpectedly high profits on the back of these global rises in gas prices, that they are asked to pay their fair share to protect people who are really struggling.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for talking to us this morning. Thank you, Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Davey.